Good day. Today in this video, I'm going to discuss a new revelation about the Russiagate scandal. This is a memo which has just been published, which was sent on 12th January 2017 by former director of the FBI, James Comey, to former director of national intelligence, James Clapper. This memo was sent by Comey to Clapper on 12th January 2017, 8 days before Donald Trump was inaugurated president. Before I discuss this memo, I just want to give a brief apology. I am sure you are all by now heartily sick of Russiagate, and of course the subject of Russiagate, the claim that Donald Trump was somehow an agent of the Russians or in some way in collusion with them, has been comprehensively discredited. Having said that, from time to time we see attempts in the media, for example in the New York Times and other places, to revive this theory. And of course, it's important to remember also the way in which Russiagate was used to hobble Donald Trump's presidency for 3 out of the 4 years that he was in office. Lastly, Russiagate was, in my opinion, one of the prime reasons for the intense anger and partisanship and acrimony which exists in the US political system today. As Dostoevsky once said, we tend to hate those we have wronged. The political class wronged Donald Trump by constantly insinuating that he was a Russian agent. And of course, that is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why they so hate him. Anyway, putting all this aside, what does this memo tell us? What was it all about? Well, the memo from Comey to Clapper was about one of the foundation documents of Russiagate, perhaps the single most important foundation document. This is this bizarre dossier that the former British MI6 agent Christopher Steele cobbled together from various sources, and which he provided to the FBI, and which alleged a detailed conspiracy between Donald Trump and his campaign and the Russians, caused, it would appear, by the Russians possessing compromising material of a sexual nature following a trip that Donald Trump had made to Moscow and a stay he had had in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel there. This bizarre document circulated widely in 2016, and it is now accepted and I think incontrovertibly proved was funded by the Democrats and by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and was indeed organized by major Democrat Party operatives. It also, I think, has been further established that Christopher Steele was consciously working for the Democrats, and that the sources for his dossier were largely an individual at the Brookings Institution called Igor Danchenko, and Igor Danchenko's ex-girlfriend, who was an individual, a Russian woman who was working at that time in Cyprus, neither of whom possessed any access to real information from the Kremlin. So this was an absurd dossier put together by people who were obviously out to make a fast buck, and spread around by Christopher Steele, who was working for Hillary Clinton and who had, as we now know, a strong animus against Donald Trump. I would add that when I read the dossier the day after it was published, I immediately identified it as largely a fabrication and realized that its contents simply could not be true. However, as we also know, the FBI gave extraordinary credence to this document. At one time, had a contractual arrangement with Christopher Steele, though that was terminated very quickly when the FBI learnt that he was actually spreading stories about the dossier to the media, and in fact that the FBI also used this dossier, despite the fact that it had not been properly corroborated, to obtain FISA warrants against the Trump aide Carter Page, which made possible surveillance of the greater Trump campaign. So this was an important document, even if, as should have been obvious, an absurd and fabricated one, created by an operative who was working for Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and who was paid by them. However, this memo is about that, and it's important also to remember the context in which this memo was written. 12th January 2017 is an important date. On 5th January 2017, James Comey met with Barack Obama and Biden, Vice President Biden as he then was, and Acting Attorney General Sally Yates in the White House, where they had a discussion, the details of which have still not been fully disclosed, about the conversations that Donald Trump's future national security advisor, Michael Flynn, was having with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. We know that these conversations were innocuous, that they broke no law, but they were nonetheless obviously the subject of a great deal of attention and concern. And we know also that following that meeting between Obama and Comey, steps were put in place by the FBI, which eventually led to Flynn being forced to resign as National Security Advisor and a prosecution being brought against him. So that happened on the 5th of January. On the 6th of January, Donald Trump met with the major intelligence chiefs of the United States. These included Clapper, Comey, CIA Chief Brennan, and various others. And over the course of that, they produced to him the intelligence community assessment, which said that the Russians had interfered in the 2016 election. And after all the other intelligence chiefs left, Comey briefed Donald Trump about the Steele dossier, whose contents Trump strenuously and categorically, and as it turned out, truthfully denied. Then a few days later, on 11th January 2017, the Steele dossier was leaked to BuzzFeed. By the way, on that same day, I published an article in the Duran saying that its contents were absurd and that it was clearly a fabrication. On the following day, 12th January 2017, we see this exchange of memos, or at least we see this memo from Comey to Clapper. And what is interesting about this memo? The first thing to say about this memo is that it shows that Comey was admitting to Clapper that the contents of Steele's dossier had not been verified. So this dossier, which was shown to Trump just a few days before, and which had just been published in BuzzFeed, and which, as Comey knew, had been used as the foundation document for FISA warrants obtained by the FBI to carry out surveillance of Carter Page and of Donald Trump's campaign, that its contents were not verified. By this point, Comey would also have known that Steele had been in contact with the US media and had spread stories based on the dossier to the US media, and had therefore been sacked by the FBI as an informer, though in fact we now know that the FBI maintained some contacts with him. Nonetheless, despite all this knowledge, we also see in this memo Comey trying to push back against Clapper's attempts to publish a statement saying that the dossier was uncorroborated. Now, Clapper was obviously trying to do that because of its publication the previous day by BuzzFeed. But Comey was saying that whilst the dossier had not been verified, it could not be said that it had not been corroborated because the FBI had established that its source, which is to say Christopher Steele, and some of its sub-sources, that possibly means Danchenko and his girlfriend in Cyprus, had been proved to be reliable. That is an extraordinary statement. We actually know now that the FBI was at this precise time interviewing Danchenko and was rapidly forming the conclusion that Danchenko was completely unreliable. By March 2017, these opinions of the FBI had hardened, and by May 2017, they apparently concluded that Danchenko and his subsource were completely unreliable. They still, however, persisted in obtaining FISA warrants on the basis of this dossier, even though they knew by that point that it was unreliable, but we will put that aside for the moment. The point is that Comey was still trying to sell the dossier to Clapper on 12th January 2017 as a document produced by a reliable source. I would add that we know from other reports, including a report or series of reports by the FBI's own Director General, Michael Horowitz, that the FBI actually knew by this point, or had been provided with information by this point, that other intelligence officials, including British intelligence officials, had doubts about Christopher Steele's reliability. And of course, as we know, the FBI had by this point terminated its formal relationship with Steele as a source because Steele was talking to the media. Nonetheless, Comey was continuing to push for Clapper to say that the sources of the dossier were reliable. Moreover, this was done in the context of Clapper obviously trying to put together a statement which would dissociate the intelligence community from the leaking of the dossier to BuzzFeed, and which would emphasize that the dossier was unverified. So here we see Comey saying that the dossier, though unverified, was based on reliable sources, and elsewhere in the dossier, in the memo, Comey also says to Clapper that the leaking of the dossier to BuzzFeed was not sourced from within the intelligence community. Now, if Clapper had done what Comey wanted, if he'd actually published a statement at that time saying that though the Steele dossier was unverified, the intelligence community had corroborated the reliability of its sources, then I think the effect would have been explosive. Indeed, at that point, the pressure on Donald Trump would have multiplied to an extraordinary degree. It's difficult for me to see this memo by Comey as anything else than an attempt by Comey to put Trump under impossible pressure. Had Comey had his way, the intelligence community would have, in effect, said that the dossier was based on information provided by a reliable source. I'm not sure what the effect would have been. Probably Donald Trump would indeed have been inaugurated on the 20th of January 2017. But the scandal that would have surrounded him at that time would have been extraordinary. And of course, Comey was saying all of that at the very time when, as we know, the FBI was gathering, accumulating evidence which proved, on the contrary, that the sources were not reliable. So why did Comey act in this way? Well, either he was completely delusional about the dossier and wanted to believe it, even though the sources that were behind it were completely unreliable, or, and I have to say this is what I think, he was obviously working towards removing Donald Trump from office or taking steps to prevent Donald Trump becoming president. I cannot see this in any other way. Moreover, as we know, Comey was at the same time as he was sending this memo to Clapper, meeting with Donald Trump and taking detailed notes of what Donald Trump was saying in a way that makes it all but clear that Comey was actually conducting surveillance of him. So here we see more evidence of what Russiagate was actually all about. It was clearly, despite the multiple denials that have been said, an attempt by certain elements within the US security services, specifically it seems the FBI, to stop Donald Trump either becoming president or, after he became president, arranging his rapid removal by spreading stories based on the Steele dossier, which were unreliable and, as it turned out, completely false. This is a major scandal, and it does beg a question about who precisely it is who's responsible for producing this memo from Comey to Clapper at this time. There's supposed to be an investigation going on by John Duran, who is now special counsel and who's supposed to be looking into the FBI's role in Russiagate. But we've been told that that will not result, or is unlikely to result, in any further charges being brought. All investigations of Russiagate by Senate and House committees of Congress seem to have come to a stop. So we see evidence here, at least, or evidence as it looks to me, of an attempt by some people in the FBI to overturn the results of an election and of a presidential election, and no real action being taken in connection to them. I find that extremely worrying, and I would invite people to look at this memo closely, this memo from Comey to Clapper, and to realise that if it is not quite a smoking gun, it is at least something that very closely approximates to that, and which would certainly be the topic of major further discussion and investigation. Thank you for joining me on this program. Please look me up on this channel again, and please also check out our various other channels. Our main channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend Alex Christoforou, and also his own channel. You'll find links below this video. Please also check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, Library, Odyssey, Rumble, and the rest. Please support us through PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar, and via Bitcoin. And last but not least, check out our shop. Look at the wonderful things that you will find there. Our amazing t-shirts, our long sleeve t-shirts like the one I'm wearing at the moment, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, and of course, our famous magic mugs. And have a wonderful day, and I look forward to you joining me in my next program. Thank you very much.